Hi, my name is Catherine Went with Syscon, and thanks for taking a moment of your time. Today I wanted to talk about the construction concept of budgets and budget allowances. So if that's not you, thanks for checking in. We'll catch you next time. For the rest of you, I get this question a lot. Budget allowances, are they good or bad? And sometimes what they mean is an allowance for equipment that's owned that they're not going to charge to the job. Sometimes they mean an allowance for unexpected things that will happen on a job. Sometimes they mean a labor allowance because they're not necessarily collecting all the actual costs from payroll. So the first thing is to dig in and find out a little bit more about what they mean by allowances. Budgets, just to get the nomenclature out of the way, represent what you will spend to do the scope of work. Your actual costs, checks you're going to write, equipment that you're going to take care of that you own, and the difference between what you spend and what they pay you is your profit. So we're talking about the budget part, what it actually costs you to get the scope of work done. So when you're putting budget together, there are several things to consider. I'm going to name a few here that are the most common ones that are not necessarily always considered in a budget. I'm sure many of you do, but always good to check in with your estimators, make sure that they're using these. Sales tax, so price of materials plus the sales tax. And for those of you in large metropolitan areas, that tax could be 2% different depending on where in that area you buy the materials from. Fully burdened payroll. It should include any 401k matching, any benefits you provide, employer-related taxes. A possible labor rate increase. You're starting a job in the spring and you know that there are increases coming up in May, June, July, or something like that. Make sure you've got that built into your budget. Another one is payroll-related insurance. So workers' comp costs, general liability costs, all of which are directly related to what your actual payroll is and comes up upon audit. Another one would be permits, roll-off containers. Anything that you're going to need to spend money on. Temporary utilities is another one. So none of you have a crystal ball. I don't have a crystal ball. We can't always necessarily know what we're going to run into on a job. So often a line item for unexpected budget things is appropriate. Some clients do that as a percentage of the whole contract. Some just have a number that they allow in there. And it gives the PMs a little bit of flexibility for unexpected things where they've got a little bit of a slush bucket, and yet you can still hold them accountable instead of hearing, well, here are the 5 unexpected things that came up, and that's why I'm over budget. So sometimes that allowance will give the PMs a chance to be a little bit flexible, and you can still hold them accountable to the overall budget. So for those of you who like to do a percentage in some kind of way, maybe the first thing to look at is, rather than kind of guessing what that is, why not take this opportunity to go look at some of the actual expenses you have and find out if you are reflecting the entire cost of them. And I'll give you a few examples. Set up the workers' comp and general liability rate tables. Go find out what your comp codes are. Go find out what your net dollars are per $100 paid. Go get your general liability rate. Bake it into that table and let it do the calculations so that you are getting the fully burdened insurance costs on those jobs. You know what they're actually costing you. Another one would be employee benefits. So the employer portion of health, dental, vision. I'll often see only the deductions but not the employer part. So you're missing that fully burdened cost for the job cost when they hit the job. 401k matching is another one. Maybe you have a cell phone allowance or a vehicle allowance. Make sure those are being accounted for. Another topic is company trucks and equipment. If you own it, it still costs you something to maintain it. You still have an asset that's being depreciated. You may have a loan on it if it's a larger vehicle. They are costing you something. And if you didn't own it, you'd be renting these pieces of equipment. So consider using the equipment shop module in order to get those indirect costs down to your job and offset. Then go do the math and figure out what your actual percentage is of those equipment and shop costs. Another good one we run into is inventory. If you carry inventory, what is the value of it? How much of it is going out to the job? Is it costed there? Is any of it coming back so that you can actually reuse it on a different job, and that job should not reflect those costs? And then the last one I'll mention today, but there are more in our article, is vacation and sick days. Several clients will charge them down to whatever job those people are on. That's not really fair for the budget unless you planned it that way. Often we'll see those come through as overhead costs, and frankly, your overall work needs to make enough profit to cover any promised vacations or sick for foremen or other key people who are usually in the field. Last word, if you compile over/under billing or work in progress reports, these percentages can play havoc because you don't actually ever see those costs hit. So if you do a percentage up front, it'll look like you have costs on there that in fact have not hit, and it will look like you earned that money and you didn't. Or if you never book those costs, you just have an allowance in your budget, you'll never use 100% of your budget, and then you're constantly playing the game of it looking like there's more to be done on the job. So those are other reasons to get right down to those actual costs rather than some of those guesses. Hope that was helpful. You know, we're here to talk anytime you need to work through some of these and maybe some of the logistics. There's more in our article, which is in our newsletters, all available on our website. Thanks for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.